So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversation. And I'm excited to have Dr. Nelva Lee, conservative Republican candidate for Georgia State School Superintendent. And I'm really excited to have a superintendent because education is really my thing, even though I'm not educated in education. It's really my thing. It's really something
Wonderful.
that's, of course, significantly important to all of us, but it's really my main focus is how do we change the world through education? And that's really how we're going to change the world. You know, the old saying, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. So I always
Amen.
love that.
Yes.
So that's a so I just want you to jump right in. It's funny, you're in Georgia. I always talk about being not to get political, but I remember one time we went to Atlanta. And then I convinced my family. We woke up really early in the morning and we drove to a plane called Americus, Georgia. And then Sunday
Okay.
morning we drove to Plains and we saw Jimmy Carter teach church that morning. And it
Nice.
was amazing. Had nothing to do with politics. I have to say it had nothing to do with politics. Talked about three types of love. So there's like eros and there's agape, and it was just amazing sermon, if you will. And I to this day, I remember it being one of the most beautiful experiences in my life. It's one of the simplest experiences of my life. I have to say one of the simplest experiences in my life too, because literally, if you've ever been to Plains, Georgia, there's literally
Nothing there.
nothing there, basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
not,
But Jimmy
not
Carter.
he's there. He's still there. There was well, no, he's not still there. I apologize, but
Right. Yeah.
there was one shopping center, one restaurant. Actually, that restaurant was completely occupied because it was Rosalind's birthday, so we had to go to the end of the shopping center to a biker bar. But the whole town's dry. He told me
Good.
if I want a beer, I can go to the antique store and get a can of Billy beer. They're still there. Everything about it, I still remember specifics. But let's just jump right into Dr. Nelva Lee, your candidacy as a superintendent, and tell me all about it.
Sure, sure. Well, a little bit about myself. I have over 20 years of experience in education. I started my own, I was a founder and CEO of my own vocational school. So just taking you back a little bit, I was one of the first in my family to obtain a college degree. And I had made that decision when I was in high school. And the summer between my junior and senior year, I obtained a trade certificate so that I could pay my way through college. And I believe in the power of trade schools. I really do. And so I started my own trade school, my own vocational school, teaching bilingual individuals how to become medical interpreters. And I did that for 20 years. And now I transition over to agency. So I basically put them to work now. I have a slew of interpreters that work for me that work for clinics and law firms. But as far as education specifically, it also comes from a personal side. I had three children. My oldest is on the spectrum. And so I had to homeschool him through fifth grade. He was very brilliant, actually, borderline genius, but also had some developmental issues, with the being on the spectrum. And so I homeschooled him until he could kind of get his sea legs under him through the fifth grade. And I was fortunate to be able to do that, because
That's beautiful.
I worked as an adjunct professor. I was an adjunct professor for various private schools, private universities. And so I was able to do that for my son. Not everyone has that capability, right? We have, if parents find themselves with a child with special needs or gifted, even, they're stuck with what one size fits all schooling. And so I'm very passionate about school choice because of that. I also adopted our daughter from the foster care system. She came to us when she was 8 after being in the foster care system since very young. And not only did she came from Puerto Rico, and not only did she have a language barrier, but she also had an IEP. And so we found that although she was in the public school system for about 6 months or so, she learned English very quickly in about 3 months. But that was about it. It was really not advancing her academically at all. She was illiterate. And so we found that pulling her out of that and putting her in a Montessori style school really was a game changer for her. They taught her how to learn. And so I want to be able to bring those same options to parents. Okay. There's tons of public Montessoris in Minnesota, in South Carolina. Why don't we have those here in Georgia? School choice, although we passed the Promise Scholarship Act, there's so many regulations and requirements that really is not true school choice. And so I'd like to expand our Promise Scholarship Act to something very similar to Florida, where it's $8,000 for all families. Anyone can use it, regardless of region, and they can use it in any educational setting because parents, not the school system, know best what their child needs to thrive. So
Now,
those are my two main initiatives: school choice and trade schools.
now that's just incredible that you mentioned those two things. Because first of all, I don't know if you've ever watched the podcast. We've had Temple Grandin. Are you familiar with Temple Grandin? We've had
No,
her
I'm
on.
not. Yeah.
Temple Grandin is an autistic scientist. She's a professor.
Wonderful.
She's a researcher, and she's autistic. And she talks about her childhood and her parents basically accommodating a big part of her learning in the beginning. And then
Right.
so there's kids that don't have that option.
Exactly.
And so bringing that into the fold and saying, look, we need to basically um, modify or make it very education specific. Not every kid. There is no one size fits all education
No,
solution. And like
exactly.
you said, in Florida, we do have that option of the $8,000. Um, I guess you would
School
say the
choice
funding
voucher.
school, right,
Mhm.
school choice voucher, which is a great thing. We also need to realize that sometimes parents don't really take that initiative to concern themselves with needing that option or that voucher. So we need to somehow I feel like we need to get the administrators involved and feel like how we could customize education to an extent. So the voucher is a great thing in Florida. I, I adopted both my kids from Thailand, and
Okay.
they had is initially they had a little trouble with the language, so we got them all they needed to get going, and then now they're doing great. But
Very good.
yeah, so and that's a great thing you're doing, and you are in Georgia, and how are you doing on the campaign? Is that being received what you're offering to people? Are you
Very much received. Everywhere I go, everyone gives me their own stories, their own battle stories. And it's really a disservice, really, that we're doing to children to force them into a one size fit all solution, right? Because children are unique. Well, every humans are unique, and we should be aiming to get every child to thrive, not conform to a cookie cutter school system. Not every child does well in 6 hours of sitting on the desk.
right,
It's not very reasonable and feasible for a lot of children, and yet that's what we're expecting, and then we're calling them problems when they're not conforming to that, right?
right,
Rather than restructure our classrooms and making sure that they're truly capable of accommodating different learning styles. And let me tell you a little bit more about my trade school initiative. So as I was mentioning, I really benefited from trade schools because not only did they provide me with experience while I was working my way through college, but as soon as I completed it, my degree, I was able to get a really good job because it was sort of like a built-in internship, if you will, right?
right,
And so many students, could benefit. If you're college bound, they could truly benefit from a trade school certification. And we're not just talking about the blue collar jobs. Yes, we need welders and electricians and plumbers, very much so. But what about the paralegals and all the myriad of medical certifications that are out there, or the myriad of um, tech type certifications that are out there, right? Those are
right,
all very much needed. We're outsourcing so much of our tech jobs out overseas because we don't have enough people here in the US that have the coding specifications or training. We can easily change that if we're offering these to our high school students. And not only are we going to be able to see increased graduation rates because they feel like, okay, high school is meant for, so it's going to actually help me with my career, but we're going to see them workforce ready right out of high school. And yes, not everybody's college material or college bound. guess what? These certifications, these trade certifications will actually help them be able to have a career and be able to put food on the table and enter the workforce fully prepared and be contributing members of society.
Absolutely. And something you mentioned for like really two things. When you talk about the trade school initiative, right? And like you said, it's not about just being a plumber or a roofer. It's not about replacing windows. There's a significant amount of truth. There's hospitality too in trade schools and all that. Then
Exactly.
comes to mind when you said you adopted one of your children out of foster care. So first, I believe you fostered her first, right? And then you
Yes. Mm-hmm. We
now
foster to
kids
adopt.
often, and there is a figure out there, often kids that don't have the path that your child had, where they go from foster home to foster home, and then they time out ultimately at 18. There
Mm-hmm.
is a figure out there, and it's a real figure, that 50% of those children are never gainfully employed in their lifetime. And that's a real figure that I've
And
read
that's
numerous
not even
times.
including those that end up in the prison system because of
Right, and I was just going to say, which to bring a more, like you said, that's a more eloquent way of saying it. Sometimes they realize that the best way to get by is the only thing they have to barter over and above their older competition is themselves.
right.
And that becomes a real network for human trafficking, which is just disgraceful.
It
And
is.
it's real. It's not me just thinking out loud, it's real. And so when you think about the trade school initiative, now if these kids literally understand the trade school initiative, they've been work through the system. And then they enter into this world at 18 with a small per diem from the state to get an apartment, to possibly get a car, or a lot of employers will say, I'll give you a bus pass for a job that they don't particularly care for. So there is so much to be gained by the trade school initiative
It is.
in Georgia, in Florida, on a
Oh,
national
all
level.
throughout. Yes.
Right. Absolutely 100%. I was never a college kid. I
Mhm.
was a smart kid, but high school really wasn't my thing. I had a job and I would leave school early to go to that job. And that company literally loved me. And they transferred me right out of high school to the main office. And then I
Good.
decided just to move to Florida, and they were like, "I cannot believe you're leaving." And I'm like,
Right.
"I just want to live in Florida. I'm
Right.
not thinking about." And it was funny because years later, I ran into a couple of people from that company, and they had grown and they had done very. They had 20 stores when I was there, and they had done very
That's
well. And
good.
they
Yeah.
were still friends, but I was happy with my decision, no doubt about it. I met my wife here and everything. Everything went great. But it's an incredible opportunity, a trade school initiative. And I
Yes.
just love the fact that you're pursuing as a superintendent of Florida. I would love to hear more states and more superintendents. One of the things I've been talking to, one of the persons I've been talking to is a superintendent of Florida's superintendent of Lake County here where I live, and she
Okay.
initiated an advisory committee, a student advisory committee.
Very
And
nice.
it's I'm trying to get with them and try to get some of the kids on the podcast. We actually have another podcast, Kids Quack, that I'm trying to get with them on that. And it's just incredible to hear that. I've never heard of it before. I got your email and I'm like, wow. So is you become superintendent. How does that take shape?
So it's an initiative here in Georgia that would not add one penny to our budget. And that's because we're currently funding up to 30 college credits for dual enrollment. So we basically just take those and allocate them towards trade schools, right? And the way that I like to see it, the way that I envision it, is very similar to how they do it in Buffalo, where eighth graders are presented with like a fear of the various trade schools that are available to them to take when they go off to high school. And that way they're already prepared and they can discuss this with their counselors prior to, and then they can make that selection towards the end of eighth grade. And so that by the ninth grade, they're already taking those classes. Some of these can be completed in as little as 6 months, 6 to 18 months. So we're not talking about taking the entirety of their high school, career. Some of them will take longer, right, depending on what profession that they're pursuing. But again, if you are college bound, this is only a net positive, right? Because not only say I'm going to be a lawyer, I can go and get a paralegal certification. And now I'm entering into this industry beforehand, getting a taste for it. And what happens if I don't really like the legal field? I have now saved myself $200,000 plus,
Right.
right? Because now I don't have to go through the whole process and then realize later that I didn't like this industry at all. But really and truly, it's a net positive for college students, and obviously, it's a net positive for anyone that is not college bound. Realizing this, back in 1980s when the DOE first started. So you know that 60% of the DOE's budget goes towards the Pell Grants, right?
Right.
Back when the DOE first started back in the 1980s, 70% of your college tuition was covered by Pell Grant. You know, college tuition has outpaced inflation. So nowadays, most students know that they're going to end up with a college with some sort of loan, right? Some sort of debt out of college. And so we are requiring people to get a mortgage just to be able to have a standard of living that's higher than what they like just out of, if they just left with a high school diploma, their standard of living is much lower, right? Than if they get a college degree. But then you get a college degree and a mortgage right alongside with it.
Right.
That's a disgrace. That's a disgrace. We shouldn't do that. And so this is an option for those that don't want the mortgage, but they still want a good career path. And we talked about the blue collars, the trades, the electricians, the plumbers, the welders. Those are all $100,000 a year jobs. Very good paying positions, right?
Absolutely.
With no college debt. And so we really need to. It's a disservice if we're not offering this to our children. So I'm going to fight very hard, but really and truly, it's just a matter of leadership. So it just requires leadership at the state level to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when you think of, and I can think of so many of my friends that have went to school to be lawyers. They've went to school. There's a school here. It's an entertainment school, an internet school. They pay a fortune, and they
Right.
realize they have no interest in the industry. I worked with a girl that knew how to build websites. The company hired her to build a website. She never got anything done. I mean, she was basically then she rolled into a sales position, and
Mhm.
she had this enormous debt. And so when you think about a trade school, it's experience in the work you're thinking about going into for the rest of your life. First, kind of tapping your feet along in that industry, see if it's really your thing,
Right.
is an incredible option. And like you said, and it could work out very well. Like you said, if you really are, you're like, oh my God, paralegal is my thing, or a doctor, to be a PA is my thing. And suddenly you realize, I
Yes.
just want to find a way to go to medical school. I want to be a doctor. It can go either way.
Correct.
Great
Correct.
way to do it because we are getting people, like you said, starting off with an enormous debt in life.
Yes. It's unfortunate. Yes.
Yeah, and I've said even with building on that, like I've said, we should have. I've never even thought of it until you just mentioned. But imagine if we had that, a person does find a career they just absolutely enjoy, learn all about it, and then the second part of their the biggest part of their student loan, maybe a small business loan, to start a business in what they really love to do, and
Yes.
then we could really close the gap we could really close the income gap or the wealth gap by empowering people with the knowledge they need to really succeed.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that would be an incredible initiative that could go on a national level. That
Right. And that would be a much better use of our budget. Over 50% of our school budget goes to administration, not to the schools, not to the teachers, not to the students, to administration, to management. And that's a disservice.
and we've seen a lot of that. I mean, I'm not bringing this up but the DOE being something that has been argued since Ronald Reagan, who said he was going to close it down, and then he really did, and it grew in size and scope on his watch. But that was just an administrative bungle. I mean, it was just and now, but so the one thing you had mentioned is when you initiate this trade school, it's budget neutral. Why do
It
we
is
always
budget
have to
neutral.
preface budget neutral? Why can't we preface an enormous investment in education over and above anything else?
Right, right. It's going to be an enormous investment in education, that's for sure. And our
Yeah,
students will benefit from it. The results will speak for themselves.
right,
But yes, the fact that it is budget neutral, it should have easier passage.
right. And then, but I'm just all about saying let let's talk about those, the Department of Government Efficiency. Let's just use the acronym, not the department or the experience we've seen so far. Let's talk about a return on investment. Imagine if we did invest $1 billion a state in something like this. And yes, $50 billion is a lot of money. It's also half of what we sent to Ukraine. Imagine if we did invest that in our education system. If we didn't necessarily have to, in order to slip past the legislative goalie and the concerned citizen goalie, if we didn't have to, if we could really say we're going to invest $50 billion in education over the next 5 years, wouldn't that be something worthwhile? And wouldn't the return on the investment be huge?
We are already, most states, education is their largest budget. Most counties, education is the largest budget. It's just the way that we are spending those dollars. It's inefficient, and definitely it's lacking vision and lacking true leadership in making sure that we are accomplishing the goals that we're setting out to do for our children. I mean, we're falling back on a national level. We are falling behind most developed countries educationally. You know, here in Georgia, 70% of our fourth graders are not proficient in reading. 76% of our eighth graders are not proficient in math. And these numbers have only declined under the current superintendent of schools. He's going on 12 years in office. And I feel for those kids that have been under him for their full academic careers, because we have only declined in the national level. We're 38th out of 50 in the state of Georgia. And so at least you guys in Florida are number one, right? Because you guys have true school choice and over 750, charter schools and options for parents. But here in Georgia, we only have 96 charter schools and very few options. And so I can tell you that we just need good leadership. You know, you saw what leadership did in Mississippi. They were almost down to the bottom, 50th in the nation, and they rose all the way to 6th. Why? Because they went back to basics. They went back to phonics and making sure that children were truly literate. And so we need to put those measures in place here in Georgia as well. We're graduating students that are going off to college and having to take remedial courses because they're still illiterate. They're functionally illiterate. So we just need to do better for our kids. They deserve better.
Well, that just gave me an enormous sense of relief when you just mentioned that a significant part of our spending, the biggest significant part of our spending is on education, because that's always been something, a point I keep beating up is
Yes.
how can we think we've spent enough or too much? But like you said, then comes the logic of we're not spending it well.
We're not
So
spending it wisely. No.
no, and then so I work in a theme park, it's the most incredible theme park in the world, and I always think things that do really well getting remodeled, rethought, revamped. But when I look at my Facebook page of my high school, it's the same building 40 something years ago. I mean, so
Yeah.
I would just age myself and say 43 years ago. 43 years ago.
Yeah.
So so and I just wonder, like I do think I see energy efficient windows in the silhouette. So I think something
Okay.
changed there. And I'm just like, but nothing else. Like the academics is the biggest thing. And people argue that the teachers union is the most powerful union in the country and the academics will never change. And I'm like, no, they will, because Dr. Nelva Lee's got this idea and somebody else has this idea and it's
Yes.
changing. There is this there is this gentrification in education. And like you said, Mississippi has done just that. They've gone from 50th to 6th. And
Yes.
imagine what one, two, three, four, and five is. I can imagine Boston is number one somewhere or number
I'll
two,
leave
right?
it up there. Yeah.
So when you think of Mississippi, I'm not generalizing, but I am saying that they've come up the ranks to 6th. That's an incredible success story
By going back to the basics.
by
Mhm.
going back to the basics. And I really think, looking back, I was a kid that had trouble reading. And when the
Mhm.
teacher thought I would never read because I was dyslexic. And my dad taught me how to read. But then I
Very
became a smart kid. And the
yes.
thing I like to tell the story is the only thing I really found interesting to read was in the library back then. There was no Google. There was like newspapers hanging on
Right.
sticks, and that's what I would read. And I became a current events walk that way.
That's
But
awesome.
it doesn't matter how you do it. It just matters that you rethink it, because we're not doing it well right now.
Right. Yeah, you benefited from someone taking the time and investing in you and making sure that they were teaching you to your specific learning style.
100%. Yeah, that's
And
all they
you
did was
and you were
laser focus on one
yes,
thing that really was the biggest thing.
it is literacy is the biggest thing. Without literacy, you can't do math problems. Without literacy,
No.
you can't do history,
And you're
chemistry even, right? You need to have that as a basic we should not move kids along from first or second grade unless they are fully literate. Definitely. And I can tell you what, here's the thing, you were always a smart kid, right? You were
I
always a
felt,
smart kid.
yeah,
Yeah.
but not, I didn't feel that way. But if I always felt like I wasn't, would I ever have grown into a smart person?
Exactly. And that's the disservice that we're doing to our children when we are relegating them to believe that they're not smart and to believe that they're not capable because we, the adults, are not teaching them properly. We're not teaching them to their learning style. Every child can learn, but it takes a good teacher and a good adults to make the effort to teach them at their learning style.
Yeah. So let's go back to one initial point. Like you said, you were a parent and your child was having trouble learning. You realized, you knew, being an educator, being
Yeah,
Nelva Lee, Dr. Nelva Lee, that what would benefit that your child was Montessori school. So there's
yeah.
2 points you made. They should be public options for Montessori
There should
schools,
be.
and a lot of them. And there should be, parents may not know that may not even understand the significant difference in Montessori versus just bumping kids from one room to another in a public school system.
Right.
So how do we get to that point where we identify what works best, where we need to focus, not just keep moving along? Like you said, we are moving kids along, and somehow they're getting passing grades. They're being taught to test, which is another total failed system.
Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Totally failed.
Yes,
They're getting great results because all they know is the test. Like they can
yes.
literally sit down and go through 1 through 10 and get 100. So how do we get to that point where we tell parents, listen, you're a child's best path? Of course, first we have to have the facilities. Let's just say hypothetically we have the facilities. How do we get to that point where parents understand what direction we need to go?
So I believe that with more options, they're more engaged for sure. And like I said, here in Minnesota, they have lots of different options for public Montessori's. So they're everywhere. So parents are aware, okay, this is an option for me. And, Montessori isn't for everyone, but it definitely works really well for children that can't sit still all day long, that have a really huge imagination. That in the case of my daughter, she needed to be out and about. She couldn't sit at his desk all day long. The Montessori school that she attended had a farm, which had a plot, of land where they were able to cultivate, different plants, and they had pigs and goats and things like that. And she absolutely loved it. And then when she came into the classroom, it was all with manipulatives, right? Things that she could touch and feel, and blocks that she learned how to read through and how to do algebra with. And so she started really building up confidence in herself. And just like you said, she started believing that she was a smart kid, because she was.
And then
But
everything changes. And then
everything
everything
changed.
changes.
Everything changed, and she started loving school. And lo and behold, she's a poet now. She makes these amazing poems. They're just beautiful. She's won awards for them. But that all changed because she started believing in herself again. And it's a disservice what we're doing to children, making them believe that they're not smart, or that they're problem children, when in reality, it's the school system that has a
Absolutely, yeah. Or if kids aren't athletic, my school system was based on athletics. And I'm not
problem.
athletic. I admit it. I
Right,
like to do things, but I'm not going to win a baseball game for a team.
right,
But so we that is really truly something that can really scar a person for
for
life. I
life.
mean,
Hmm.
and so I just love the fact that um that you're doing this. And you're, when you run against, I have to ask this question. When
Uh-huh.
you run against a 12-year incumbent, you know
Yes,
what you're up against, right?
yes.
You realize incumbency is almost everything. It's not, but it's an enormous.
It's difficult to overcome because people just go, oh well, if it's not broke, I'm not gonna mess with it. But the school system is broken in Georgia specifically, and so it is broke. So let's make a change. So 38th out of 50 does not mean that we need to continue with the same tide leadership for sure. But yes, he has a war chest. He has the name recognition. So definitely it's a uphill battle, but it's one that I'm willing to take because our children are worth it.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful thing, and I really hope you. I think you will win because that's the trend we're seeing now. Is the
Yes.
the people that are willing to swing the bat the hardest are really the ones that are getting the attention now. So I think that's a good thing too. And I've given a lot of credit, whether I agree with the current administration on a lot of things or not. I've given a lot of credit to the fact that he is the Reggie Jackson of baseball. He is the one that hits the most strikeouts, but also sometimes hits a home run when you least expect
Right.
it.
Every now and then, correct.
So and that's the thing that I really love about this time. That's the thing I love about being a podcaster. When I ran for office, I remember coining the phrase right there off the top of my head. I said, I'm not really into raising money. I'm into raising awareness. And then I became an idiot right then and there or a naive person at best. And so the podcast was great for me. I'm like, I can't imagine taking people's money to run for office, but I can try to meet people like you and say, we can do this together. We
Yes.
can do this. And
Yes.
now I want to talk about a book you wrote, and it was about surviving. It was about healing. Tell me about the book.
Okay, so I've written 4 books. Are you talking about Victoria specifically?
Yes,
Okay,
Victorious.
got
Victoria.
it.
Yeah,
So
I was just
yes,
looking. Yeah.
okay. So I tell everyone that my books are my written testimonies. Okay, and that's for most of my books. The Bible says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And so for me, I give my testimonies in book form. So I write them out, and I really that book specifically, Victorious, was about my childhood. I had a lot of trauma as a child. Specifically, I was abused, and I was able to overcome that. And I really just wanted to put in writing how these are the steps that I took to get over to overcome that, to overcome depression and PTSD. And this is how you can do that as well. Because depression and anxiety really are chains for a lot of people. It keeps them so emotionally in a bondage. And I want to see all of that dispersed, broken. My other book, Be the Superhero of Your Story, is very similar in theme, but it's specifically for those that are going through anxiety and depression. And I show them why those challenges are so important. It displays your superpowers, right? Every superhero had a major challenge that they overcame. So you have these challenges aren't there to bury you. They're there to show off your true powers. And so you have to rise above them. That's really the essence of resilience, is rising above challenges that come our way and figuring out how to make them into our stepping stones. And so those 2 books are very complementary in that way.
Wow, and I was going to ask that because so you had these and everybody's had these challenges. Not the I didn't have physical abuse in my life, but I always felt like there was times when people were out to steal my inner peace in a
Got it.
sense, right? And so and then I thought, because I had this conversation with Pastor Jackson Lahamer. He was in Donald Trump's office when they created an office in the White House to sort of mitigate all the pressure that's been put on conservative organizations and churches.
Okay.
And and that office is there now. And I said, imagine we were talking about how churches are underused. They're generally the most underused
Buildings, yeah.
buildings in the country. Sundays are kind of busy and Wednesday afternoons
Maybe
maybe.
Wednesday, right?
Imagine if kids could go to a church on their own accord and understand the things you're talking about, how to overcome and not let it take out not let it defeat their purpose in life. They have a
Exactly.
purpose. They've been abused, and that's a problem. That's a huge problem. But how do you overcome it? You overcame it. You wrote these books about it. I'm going to read them
Yes.
both actually. I haven't
Okay.
gotten to it yet, but
Okay.
but how do we do like sort of a preemptive strike on it, where they don't get to the point where at an older age they start wondering, how do I prevail from this?
Right, right. Well, the number one thing is to realize that you're not, you know, a victim. I think that's the number one. Like, you're not a victim. Just because this happened to you does not mean that this is your story. This does not define who you are. One of my favorite quotes is, life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it's really important that just because this is part of your story, it doesn't define you. It's not your entire story. And so many people get very stuck on the fact that, oh, this happened to me. It's really about the, what you tell yourself around it, how you interpret what happened to you is really the power that you give to it. And I'm not saying that nice things or bad things that happen to you are good things. I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm simply saying is the way is the narrative that you give around it that defines how much power it has over you. And if
Right.
you give I love, Tony Robbins says this a lot. Life is not happening to you; it's happening for you. And that one little word that changed from 2 to 4
Right.
is powerful.
Right.
If and it's all about the words that we use to define our experience. So if you think about it, if you think, okay, this didn't happen to me, but it happened for me. Okay, so now you're trying to figure out how did it happen for me? And now you're actively looking to see how this quote unquote bad thing is actually going to be for your good. One of my favorite Bible verses is like, all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his promise, right? Romans eight
Right.
twenty eight. And that's very similar to that, to that phrase, because if you're thinking about every single thing that happens in my life is happening for me, okay, it gives me a different perspective about that thing. So if I know that in the end, this wasn't a bad thing, it's actually for me, okay, I have to figure out
Figure out.
how is it going to help me? In my case, I figured out that it helped me in the way that I can turn around and help others, right? I now become
Yeah.
an advocate for others and I become someone who they believe they can trust because I've been there. I've walked the walk, right?
Right.
And so I can bring others along with me. That's one good thing. And it's also made me a very strong lady. Very
Yeah.
few things that you throw at me are going to, I'm like,
I
really?
can
That's all you got?
I
Very
can
few
see
things
that.
are going to bury me because I've overcome so much. And so everything in life is for your good. Think
And
of yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I love it. I'm really taking it all in and I love it.
Yes.
I'm fine now, I'm fine, but I always thought about when I wasn't fine, what would have
Right.
made it better?
Right. What
And
have we
and
been
now
doing?
everything's great. No complaints. I'm fine. But
Very
when I
good.
wasn't fine, when things were tough, I remember I remember when I was telling a friend about the time I lived in Hawaii for a year and a half
Mhm.
and she basically okay, so I'll just say it. She said it sounds like you went there to die. And
Oh.
I was like, yes,
Mhm.
it could have very well been that. But I came back. I
Amen.
decided to give it a second chance.
Yeah.
But I always think about things like teenage suicide that's underpublished
Mhm.
and underreported and there's
And
a problem.
they increased after COVID.
And
Suicide rates increase, alcoholism, drug use, the whole gamut,
the
mental
whole
health
thing,
issues.
yeah, when you think of everything going on today, when you just said drug use, when we talk about whatever, Venezuela, when we talk about
Mhm.
Mexico, it's the inner peace part that we're not talking about. That's the problem. It's not the
Right.
supply, it's the demand. And
Yes.
how and I look back on that, and I'm going a little too deep into this,
It's okay.
but I don't know that there's a way to address it. Like I said, there is no one size fits all, especially for this kind of thing. But
Well, I would say to start off with, unplug a little bit, less social media, less news, because
yes,
it really only feeds the anxiety. It only feeds the lack of peace. And so if and you have to, meditation, prayer. I know it sounds wonky, but those things work.
they do work. Yeah,
Eating
absolutely.
healthy, exercise, surrounding yourself with people that love and support you. They might you hear about them, but they work if you are very intentional about those things. But yes, less social media, less news. Those things only rob your peace.
So right now, currently, are you working in the school system? What are you doing currently on top of the campaign? What are you doing
So
currently?
I'm a business owner.
Right.
I'm
You own the trade school, right?
Yeah, well, I no longer own the trade school. I now own the agency.
The agency,
Yes,
right?
yes. And I also have a crypto coin that is real estate backed crypto coin. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. We can have another podcast. I'll tell you a little
Yes.
about my crypto coin and really how I hope to solve the issue of homelessness in America.
That would be beautiful too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
No, that would be beautiful too. So, okay, so I'm gonna let you go soon. I know you're busy, but tell me, just talk about the campaign for one more time. Tell me
sure.
all about, because I want to know, are you out there every day knocking on doors? Because I know you're busy.
Yes, I do all the above. I knock on doors. I have a fundraiser, a golf tournament fundraiser coming up in
Beautiful.
January. I also go to different speeches. I go to a lot of different events and give my platform speech, which your listeners can just go to my website, drnelvalee.com, and I've got it recorded there. And I also post, do a lot of podcasts. So I've got all my podcast interviews on my website as well. So it's drnelvalee.com, and they can
I've been
also,
there. I
yeah, they
watched
can
the speech.
also
I
find,
loved it. I loved
yeah,
it.
thank you. They can also find my books on that website as well. But yes, I just keep busy, like I said, going around, meeting my neighbors and letting them know about my platform, doing phone calls, text messages, all the above.
That's beautiful. I am so hopeful that you will win this. I think you will win this election because,
Thank
like I
you. I
said, this is
appreciate
the
that.
time that it's
Yes,
going to happen. This is the time when new faces are going to start, and this would be an incredible. I think you're not only going to win this election. I could possibly. There's a chance you could be the next Secretary of Education in time
very nice. I love that.
because I would love that because everything you prefaced here is things I've
Mhm,
only talked about and thought about, and it would just
mhm.
be incredible to see a lot of it take shape on it, not only just in Georgia, and like you said, the Mississippi
Nationally, yeah.
success story on a national level. Let's just get going. Let's get let's get this movement moving.
Yes, for
So
sure.
this has been wonderful, Dr. Nelva Lee. I very much appreciate it. I want to have you on again, and I will be
Please do.
emailing you. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I would love that. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for your time. If you want to tell us all anything you want to tell us about how to get the website again, the books, because the books look incredible. The two that we just talked about, and there's four, and I know that because I was all over your website before we did
Okay, good.
so.
So again, it's DRNELVA Lee, Lee.com. So drnelvalee.com.
DrNelvaLee.com. Got it.
And
Wonderful.
it also has links to my social media handles on there as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Nelva Lee, candidate for superintendent of the Georgia school system, right?
That's
And
correct.
I'm excited to see you. I'm excited to hear more about you, and I'm excited to stay in touch and see how everything's going. We'll talk
Sounds
soon.
good. Thank you
Thank you,
so much
Doctor.
for having me.
Thank
Have a
you so
great
much for
and
being
Merry
here.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you, ma'am.
God bless.